All right, everybody, we're starting a little bit late. That's because I am boomer adjacent and cannot figure out my Patreon. Soon that will be solved. And when I solve that, well, the way I'm going to solve it is by getting Lou to do it for me, since she's got a much bigger brain than me and more synapses firing than I have at the moment. She's going to be able to figure out the Patreon. And next time we won't have issues like this. This is going to be a regular feature of my Patreon going forward, folks. The intersection of psychology and philosophy, which has interested me for many, many years. I happened to find a dear friend in Michael Liebowitz who has, I think, used philosophy to make his life a very different phenomenon from the way it was starting. I'm on chapter 3 of your book, Michael. So
Nice.
nobody can give me shit about not reading your book. The only problem is I'm reading it right before I go to bed, so I get like two or three pages in, and this is not a comment on your writing, by the way. I get about two or three pages in, and then I sort of nod off into Never Never Land. So, but it did give me some insight into some of your early life, and what I thought we would do. For these first couple episodes, we talk about your life first, then my life second, how we grew up, what if we lived in a determinist universe where our lives were set by our upbringing and we had no free will and no capacity to change, where we might we probably would have been in very different places than we are right now. And there's a lot of similarities in the way that we grew up. Yours is far more extreme than mine in many ways, but still, in I think a great deal of violence and a great deal of inappropriate stuff going on in our early lives that could have and did for a time for you and for me push us into a path of self-destructive behavior until we came in contact with some rational principles. So, Michael, I wanted to start off with your life first. Tell us about your life, man. Where you grew up, what you experienced early on, all the way up until your incarceration. And we could talk about, then we could talk about improvement later, but talk about your life early on.
All right. So whenever a couple caveats. First of all, I am in no way blaming my upbringing, my parents, or anything else for how I turned out or how things turned out for me. I always could have made a different choice, as is evidenced by the fact that I eventually did make different choices and did improve myself. The second thing is, whenever a story like this is told, it necessarily entails going forward and backward a little bit throughout in order to make sense, because to tell it, things happen pretty much simultaneously. So to try to tell it all linearly just doesn't make much sense. So let me just start with saying, so I grew up in Wethersfield, Connecticut, a small town that's a pretty wealthy town, by and large, upper middle class probably. But I grew up in a housing project within the town. Now, some people get upset with me when I say housing project because they think housing project means you have guns going off all night, loud music, brick buildings with bars on the windows. We certainly didn't have that, but it is low income housing. It's a poor neighborhood, especially relative to the surrounding town. So my parents were both drug addicts, heroin addicts. My father was an alcoholic in addition, and a pretty violent one. When he would drink, he got violent. He abused my mother. But they got divorced when I was relatively young. I think three. They were together for a little while, and then they got married again later on, divorced again, back together. So that's kind of a mess. So one of my earliest of memories entails, when I say memories, mind you, this is not something that's crystal clear in my head. It's just I do have vague reminiscences of it. Was a shooting that occurred at my house. Now I can either just tell it from my perspective, or I can just tell what actually happened because I happen to know from talking to both my parents. So I'm going to do it
Now, this
that
is this
way.
is this is something you recount in your book, by the way.
Right. So I do have memories of it, but they're not clear. So my father and his buddies have been selling these idiots crushed aspirin for months and telling them it was coke. These fools kept buying it. and eventually realized what was going on. I don't know how they realized it. Maybe they shared it with someone who was like, "What are you guys doing?" But whatever. So they come to the house, and my mother was cooking something. I don't know. So, and my father had a couple buddies over, and my mother had a really big mouth. So my mother goes out into the yard and she starts yelling at the guys. And one of the guys says, "Shut up, bitch." When the guy says that, my father hits him. The guy drops to one knee. He then pulls out a 38. I believe a 38. Now he's within, 4 or 5 feet of my father and just starts shooting, but he misses every time. My father's one of these guys. Like I don't know. I don't know. He lived to be in his 60s. I don't know how he managed that, but he just was a. If there's such thing as a luck, then he had it. So he misses my father. My father runs into the house. My father's friend gets shot in the leg, and there's a bullet hole in my door. And later on, my mother lined me up to the door, and it would, if that bullet hit me, it was hitting me straight through the heart. So I would have been dead at 2 or 3, whatever I was. So anyway, so my mother is covering me up, going up the stairs because she's trying to shield me from the gunfire. My father races by us. He goes upstairs, goes underneath my mother's bed, and he pulls out his shotgun. So he comes, runs back by my mother and me with the shotgun. He goes outside, and these project houses are very close together. Maybe 15 feet apart or so. So my father ends up pinning the guy to the house next door, shotgun to his head, ready to just, end the dude's existence. And my mother comes out and says, "Billy," is my father's name, "your son's in the house, please." No, 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 no. So my father doesn't do it. Um, Everybody ends up, or we're down at the police station, whatever. Now, one of these assholes in the police station that just shot up my house, shot my father's friend, tried to murder my father, and put my life at risk, has the nerve to ask my mother for a light. He says, "Can I get a light for my cigarette?" Of course, she told him to fuck off. She's not doing that. My father and his friends end up putting the guy in the hospital. I don't know exactly how. My father goes to the hospital. The guy's in there and he's got the tubes coming out of his nose. And after whatever they did to him to put him there, which I still don't know. And my father's looking at the guy, and the guy, he grabs the guy's life support. And the guy says, he's shaking his head, "No, no, no." Well, I guess it wasn't actually life support. It's probably just the regular IV. And my father's telling him, "You gonna rat? You gonna snitch?" And the guy's shaking his head, "No, no, no." And my father yanked it out. But the guy ends up not dying. But I've heard about that story over and over and over and over again in my mind. Another interesting story involving my father is I remember my father. They took me out. They were playing cards, obviously gambling. I know now. I didn't understand it then that that's what they were doing. And then we went home, and my father and his friend were over, and I was up in my bedroom, and I had this little Fisher Price record player, and I'm listening to my record player. I must have been 4 or 5, I don't know. These guys come in, they break in the house. One of them's got the bandana going around, another guy doesn't, and so at my age, I'd seen burglaries happen on TV and robberies, like Jesse James with the bandana. So I'm assuming that's what it is. I don't understand that these are guys my father and his friend just ripped off at this card game. That's why they're at the house. What the hell do I know? So one of the guys, he comes in my bedroom, and I say to him, "I'm just worried about my mom's jewelry." Now, first of all, my mother didn't have any jewelry. Second, if she did, I just tipped the guy off that she did. And he tells me to shut off my record player, and I tell him no, I'm not going to do that. Anyways, these guys they beat my father's friend with a hammer. They cut my father's face with some metal object. I don't know what it was. I always assumed it was a hacksaw, but I'm not really sure that's what it was. And so that happens. A few weeks later, I was out and I'm shopping with my mother at the A&P. I don't think they have A&P anymore, but they had it then. So my mother takes me in. We're in the A&P, and this guy comes hobbling along. He's got crutches on it. He's got his head all bandaged up, and he and my mother exchange words. And I don't know what that's all about. I knew it was hostile, but I didn't know what it was. So later on, my mother told me that was the guy that broke in the house. After they broke in the house, my father and his friend went and beat the guy with chains. That's why he was hobbling along on crutches, and that's why he had his head bandaged up. One more story involving my dad that I'll tell you about is there's a guy in Connecticut. He's dead now. His name was Matty Lupo. Matty Lupo was probably the most dangerous person, or at least one of the most dangerous people that was ever around, known for shooting people. And he was staying with my father, and they're drug addicts. So the guy ends up stealing something from my father. My father goes outside. He's got a bat on him. Matty opens up his jacket. He's got his pistol inside, and my father beats this guy, pretty severely with this bat. He crawls to the end of the street. All the neighbors say, "Look, this is what happened." The cops asked Matty, "What happened?" We have, 20, 30 witnesses that all say Mr. Liebowitz beat you with the bat. Matty says, "No, I fell down the stairs. I don't know what you're talking about." So my father never got arrested. Matty was going to kill my father, but in the meantime, my father's wife died of a drug overdose, and Matty felt bad. So they ended up being friends again after that scenario. As far as I know, until the end of Matty's life, they were friends. Matty was a little bit older. So anyway, so you have to understand. So what's happening in my head as I'm growing up is in the kids in my neighborhood know my father. My father, gets into fights. Six cruisers come because they know he's fighting the cops. That's what he's doing every single time. So one time I'm 5 and I get into a fight and somebody calls the cops and says Leibowitz is out there fighting and they think they got to send the whole arsenal. But it's just a little kid fighting. So I want to be like my father. I want to be that tough guy, that gangster, that guy with a reputation, that guy that no one fucks with. Problem was, I'm small and I was weak and I couldn't fight and I got bullied as a kid. And, interesting, I'm going out to lunch later on. So I actually have to talk to Persephone to figure out what time we're doing the other thing because I'm having lunch with one of my old friends, somebody that was younger than me. So he wasn't picking on me, but his older brother did. And it's an interesting thing, Mark, that, we tend to remember those that pick on us, but not the ones that we picked on. Because I did my share of bullying too. Interesting. That didn't leave the same, dent on me as as what happened to me. So I wanted to be a gangster, wanted to be tough, couldn't fight worth a lick, and was small. Um, so eventually I end up using weapons. Now you can possibly understand that a little bit better through this. I'm 6 years old. My friend Ben um, strangles me, pulls an exacto knife on me. We're
Wait,
six, he's
wait, you're
six.
6?
Yeah. So I go home and I've got strangulation marks on my neck, and I tell my mother,
My
and my
God.
mother tells me, listen, you're going to go grab a beer bottle and you're going to hit this kid over the head with it. So my mother tells me to do that. That's what I do. I go crack him over his head with the beer bottle. Um, and, I'm really all through my youth. I want to be tough, but I'm not tough. Uh, there was a time when I was supposed to fight a kid and I was scared and I backed down. And my mother told me how embarrassed she was and how humiliated she was that I wouldn't fight the guy. And my father, too. They were just so ashamed of me. So I learned that if I wanted to get that reputation, there was only one way, absolute brutality. I had to be the guy where everybody else wants to fist fight. I will pull a gun and I will put a hole in you, and that will be the end of it. And there will be no mistake, about who is willing to escalate this thing. So, you have that sort of picture. Now, also, as a kid, I developed wicked abandonment issues. Anybody familiar with psychology, the intersection of psychology and philosophy will understand that if you look up attachment theory, I would be anxious ambivalent on that would be the attachment style that best describes me. Wicked abandonment issues, try to cling on to people to prevent them from leaving me, to prevent them from abandoning me. My mother used to leave me home all the time. She started leaving me home alone when I was 6. She wouldn't come back, for hours on end. She went to jail. My stepfather went to jail. My father was absent by this time, so I'm not seeing him. He makes promises. He's going to come. He doesn't show up. And when I was 8 years old, now a few things happened. So so I'm being often neglected, promises broken. So I'm learning not to trust people that I care about. Now, 3 things happened. When I was 8, my father and his wife beat my mother savagely in the street. My father had taken me out. We went bowling, I think duck pin bowling, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm expecting I'm sleeping over my father's. He lived right around the corner. Now, my father lived around the corner from me. And when I say around the corner, I mean if I yell, Dad, he can hear me, right? So he lives around the corner. He had nothing to do with me for like 2 years living around the corner. So much so. Some older kids in the neighborhood once, I had beat up one of their little brothers on the bus. The kid was actually older than me than I had a fight with. So these two kids, I'm 9, they're 16. One of them hoists me up like in a body slam mode, and his friend puts a firecracker in my face with a flame on it. So, scares the hell out of me. I told my father, and my father says, well, let your mother's husband handle it. So that's the type of neglect going on there. And then my father and his wife, they stopped by my apartment on the way back to his place. I didn't know then. I know now. They left a note on the door that said, "Mr. and Mrs. Douchebag, come get your son." So, I'm in the house playing with my stepbrother. I'm having a blast. This is fun. I don't know any of this is going on. All of a sudden I hear, "Let's go, Mike." It's my mother, and she's pissed, and I don't, whatever. And she tells the woman, "You're the douchebag," and blah blah blah. So he and my father and stepmother beat, kicked, stomped my mother in the street. My stepfather was there, didn't even intervene, didn't try to help, nothing. The coward that he was. None of the neighbors tried to help. And I'm 9 years old and I'm crying my eyes out. And the cops come, and this cop Goldberg, I'm nine now. This guy, and Goldberg was a big cop. He's one of these guys, everyone knows him. He's the tough guy cop. He grabs me and shakes me and tells me, stop crying and act like a man. I looking back, it's like, dude, why don't you act like a man? You know what I mean? You're shaking a 9-year-old kid. So I start developing this fear that my mother's going to die. Um, 2 years later, my mother overdosed once, almost dies. A couple weeks after that, overdosed again, almost died. So I've got this idea that my mother's going to die. It turns into the biggest fear that I could ever have. And I've also got neglect issues, abandonment issues, fear my mother's going to die. Um, I'm getting older, I'm growing up, and I have my first girlfriend. We dated from 13 to 17. I was abusive towards her verbally and physically. I was very angry, very jealous, getting into fights with guys that she's involved with, not even dating, just talk to or whatever. Very controlling, just thinking I can control the whole situation. You know what I mean? Of course, I could not control the situation, but we ended up breaking up. When I think I was 17. We're still friends today, Mark. You actually met her at the conference in Boston.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm getting in trouble a lot. I was expelled from school in eighth grade, expelled in ninth grade, thrown out of another school, then another. I'm always getting thrown out of school, getting arrested for petty crimes, but nothing serious yet. Then when I was 18, I met Lonnie, my another ex-girlfriend who I'm friends with today, interestingly. So she and I start dating, and she's got friends that are guys, and I cannot handle it. And how do I talk about this without like these dudes are pricks. Let me just I have to be honest if I'm going to talk about the situation. So one day, Lonnie's mother calls me, said Lonnie's hanging around with these guys. Da, 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 I don't want her hanging around with them. They're bringing her home late. So I call one of them up and I say, dude, listen, man. I said, please, if you're gonna hang out with Lonnie, just don't be bringing her home late. And the guy says to me, yo, I'll fucking stomp you. Now I told him at that time, I said, listen, kid, I'm going to tell you this one time. You're getting yourself into something that you have no idea what's coming. Leave me alone. Fuck you. Blah, blah. All right. So Lonnie's sister subsequently calls me. She says, that dude's at the house. Kenny and I, my best friend, we go over there. We beat this kid. His friends all abandoned him. We beat him in the street with a bat, left him there, took off. And they just keep calling me, harassing me, threatening me, these kids. I went out there, man. I got into another altercation with them, hit two of them in the face with the flat end of a hammer, knocked them both out. I got arrested for that. I've also got gun charges, drug charges, all kinds of stuff. Um, and then Lonnie by now has a new boyfriend, and she's dating him, and I'm jealous. I'm upset about it. She and I hang out one night. So all those old feelings, jealousy, control come back. I'm very angry. I end up talking to him. And then I asked my friends, go over the house and beat the kid up. They said, okay, they'll do it. They'll go there. They'll beat him up. I told them, do not touch her. Just beat him up. Kenny and I then took a car alone. And I had in my console, the car, I had two paring knives that we used for cutting cigars, to smoke weed. And so I tell Kenny, I open the console and I show Kenny the knives, and I, mind you, now I'm detoxing at this point off of methadone. I'm drunk as hell, so my memory might be a little off. I showed him the knives. I think he said to me, "Do you want me to stab him?" And I think I said yes. I'm not. I'm pretty sure of that. But like I said, I was hammered. So he goes and he stabs Hector 4 times, and he stabs Lonnie once in the leg by mistake. Um, I don't know, I don't want to call it a stab. He kind of cut her leg with the knife. Now I go home. The whole reason I had them go and not me is because I wanted to establish an alibi. So I go home. By now the booze is wearing off. So, I'm not in the same frame of mind. Kenny comes home and he shows me he's got a knife covered in blood, and I freak out. And I'm like, dude, I told you to beat him up. I never told you to do that. I don't know that's why my reaction there doesn't comport with my memory from when I dropped him off. My memory when I dropped him off is I showed him the knife. He asked me if I wanted him to stab him, and I said yes. But then the after effect was I was freaked out that he stabbed him. So I don't know. And that was verified by the other witnesses. They all said that I was freaked out by the fact that he stabbed him. So I don't really know. I'm pretty sure that it was just a matter of the booze wearing off. So, the kid that gets stabbed tells the police that it was me. He saw my face. I was in the house. Now, it was not me, but nevertheless, the cops came. They arrest me, and we all basically spilled the beans once the cops were involved. And I end up getting 27 years for that. I got 6 years for hitting the two kids in the face with a hammer, plus a gun charge, plus I had drug charge. And I end up 21 years old, staring down the barrel of a 33-year prison sentence. So maybe I'll leave it there and let you ask.
I want to ask you a question because
Sure.
a few questions actually. It seems like you grew up in complete and total chaos, like unpredictable environment from one day to the next. In this respect, I think we're very similar because I didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next when I grew up. And I think a kid needs a stability. Was there anyone in your life at that formidable stage of your life before you got arrested for this crime and before you spent all those years in prison who served as a sort of enlightened witness to you, who gave you a reflection of yourself as a good person, as a decent person? Was there
So
anybody?
my aunt and uncle had me live with them for a little while. They were fairly stable, certainly much more stable than we were. So they tried. I had guidance counselors that tried to reach out to me. Teachers tried to help me. Cops. One of the cops that tried to help me, who's interestingly is my boss now and a very good friend of mine. And he one day I went into a dance. I must have been 16, 15, 16. I don't know. And I was plastered. I mean, you could just see it all over my face. And he pulled me aside and he pats me down. And I didn't have anything on me. He said, look, even if I found something, I was just going to take it. I wasn't going to arrest you, Michael. He said, but I want to talk to you. He said, I've known your father his whole life. He said your father was smart. He was, funny, nice guy, but he had low self-esteem, and because of it, he did drugs, and it ruined his life. And don't let that happen to you, is what he said to me. And there were other people that tried. At a young age, I had my grandfather, but I mean, he was very successful in stock market and gambling on sports, but he was hypercritical. He wasn't opposed to breaking the law, I guess is what I could say. But I never saw that side of him because he died when I was 12. When I was 13, after he died, he had been paying our rent in the projects. But when he died, we missed a month. And they wanted us out for a long time, given what was going on at my house, shootings, the drug raids, all. They wanted us gone. But my grandfather had influence in town, and he kept that from happening. Once he died, we got evicted and I went and lived with my grandmother. My grandmother was a raging alcoholic. She used to get drunk and throw me out of the house. 13, go sleep under a bridge, that type of thing. Once I was 15 or 16, I realized that what she says doesn't matter. She has no power over me. She can tell me to get out till she's blue in the face. She can't, yeah, I don't have to listen. So I stopped listening at that point. But, in the meantime, my mother's in and out of jail. My father's in and out of jail. So, yes, complete chaos. And there
So
were, there
nobody,
were
nobody, nobody in your life really was a consistent voice of
not
reason,
consistent. No.
or,
And to
or
be
even a
fair,
consistent, even a consistent
no.
reflection of love for you or care
No,
for you.
no. But now let me just say, my parents never, there was never any doubt that they loved me. I know my parents loved me. You know what I mean? Like my mother
Hmm.
always told me she loved me. My father always told me he loved me. Like that's why today I have no problem telling people I love them. Like I'm not a person that gets uncomfortable with that. If I love someone, I love you. You know what I mean? It's not an issue. I tell my friends I love them. I don't mind. It's not something difficult. It's just they were just wrecked. And it's interesting because years later, when I was in prison, I needed to get my birth certificate. And it came in, and I looked at it, and it had my parents' date of births on it. And I realized now at this point, I'm maybe in my 40s. And I see when I was born, my mother was 20 years old and my father was 22. And at that moment, it really hit me like they were kids. They were kids who each had horrendous upbringings of their own. You know what I mean? Now, the thing is, I don't excuse their behavior because I don't excuse mine, but it does lead me to understand more of.
Did you explore your parents' histories to try to understand what motivated them to be what they
Oh, I
were?
know. It's unequivocal. I know what drove them. I know. I mean, yeah, yes, I've explored. I've discussed. I know. My father. I mean, just I don't know how much we want to get bogged down in his upbringing, but his mother's a raging alcoholic. His father, my grandfather, abused his mother in front of him. My grandfather was the type of guy. He used to tell me, when I was a little kid, you don't do nothing right. You do everything in this, whatever, I'll say it. He used to say, you do everything backwards like a goddamn Chinaman. That's what he used to tell me when I was a kid. And my father, my grandfather's out at work. So my father decides he's going to mow the lawn. He wants to impress his dad, do a nice thing, go mow the lawn for him. My grandfather comes home, sees it, and mows it right over again,
Yeah,
telling me
that's very
basically,
disturbing. That's very disturbing
yes.
for a young child.
Yeah, and it was, and my father was also adopted. So in his head, he's got to have that sense that adopted kids get, that somebody didn't want him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somebody didn't
Mhm.
want him off the bat. And then you've got this constant message that you're not good enough. Now, my grandfather grew up poor. He was a Jewish kid who grew up poor in New York, doing his homework underneath streetlights, type of thing. Worked his way, went to Yale, became a pharmacist, served in World War II in the Navy, ended up being a successful stock investor. So in his world, he does everything for himself, self-made. So I get his behavior also, but then it's the thing where you feel like you're never measuring up, is what my father, experienced. And then on my mother's side, her mother was also a raging alcoholic. I'll tell a story about my two drunk grandmothers in a second, but raging alcoholic. Her father cheated on the mother, left the family, abandoned them when they were very young, left her with her alcoholic mother. So she's got, all those issues, and they met when they were very young, and, it was just combustible. Just to give an example of my two drunk grandmothers, one day, my girlfriend, the one that you met, she's over the house, and my two grandmothers are on the phone going crazy, yelling. And so I pick up the phone, like, what is happening here? What's going on? And both of my grandmothers, one of which my 15-year-old girlfriend can hear, are telling me what a whore my 15-year-old girlfriend is. She's a whore, and it's about time you know it. Now, mind you, neither one of them is in any position to know whether this is true or not. Certainly not the grandmother on the other phone, my mother's mother, who's never met Shannon, doesn't know her from Adam, and they're drunk calling her a whore and a slut and that type of thing. So just a complete shit show, for lack of a better phrase.
Let me ask you. I have. Did you search out your parents passed after you were in prison, or did this happen
No,
simultaneously?
no,
You didn't search
I
it out.
always knew. It wasn't even a matter, Mark, of searching out. I did search out in my own mind. I thought about what they went through for understanding, but coming to know the raw facts was just natural. That was just them telling me,
Hmm.
what was happening, what was going on.
Okay, so it wasn't really until you got to prison and started really introspecting and then reading and opening your mind to ideas that you started to uh, connect all the dots together in a way that was constructive for you, that helped you to rebuild your life
Well, to rebuild my mind, really.
and
I mean,
rebuild your mind.
yeah. So now I'd always been, as far back as I can remember, somebody interested in human behavior, why people do what they do. But I was very much an environmental determinist in the sense that and I don't know if I applied this consistently. The odds are I did not, but basically it excused me of everything I ever did. Like, I remember telling a friend of mine on the telephone once, she called me and I was 19, I think, and drunk. And she says, Jesus, you're drunk again? Like every night you're drunk. And I told her, you don't know what I've been through in life. You're in no position to judge. And she said to me, how long do you think you can keep saying that? Like, how long do you think you can keep holding on to that without growing, without, doing something with your life? And that always stuck with me, as did a conversation I had with a guy in prison. I had been in jail 6 months. This guy had been in 20 years and was doing 3 life sentences. And I said to him one day, we were talking, I said, I just don't think I belong in prison. And he said, no, no, Leibowitz, you're exactly where you need to be. And that's one of those harsh truths that you need to hear. So I'm in prison, and I decide I want to do better. And reading is the only way. You have to read. And in prison, I read over 650 books. I got 2 associate's degrees, one in psychology, one in paralegal studies. I completed 2 certificate programs, one in drug and alcohol counseling, one in psychology and social work. I did every program. They're garbage, but I still did them all. Brent McCall and I, my friend, we designed a program that we ran in the prison for 4 years, and of course the books. So I
But
definitely
what
made.
sparked you? What sparked you into after coming from an environment of such chaos, really with no voice in your life? I mean, you had the words that your parents were telling you that they love you, but there's actions that are that definitively contradict that. So personally, that would make me neurotic as fuck, because when words don't meet actions, it causes a great deal of confusion and distrust, which is probably the source of a lot of your anxiety. Without any positive influences in your life, what the fuck message finally got through to you? So I mean, there has to be an aha moment there.
Well, 21 years old, looking at spending 33 years in prison. It's a lot. It's a lot to take. Now, I had come across, when I was 18 years old, I was driving, and I thought I thought the engine was burning out and I needed water. So I pulled over, and I had my pit bull with me, and I used, I had my tank top, my tattoos showing, hat on backwards. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting and I'm hoping someone will help. And this guy pulls over. So he gives me a ride and he starts talking to me about this business he does. And, he gets me interested. And it turns out he's an Amway salesman. And so I get involved in that for a little while. And within that, there's this list. I think it's 70 books that are self-help books, economics books, motivational books, all kinds of stuff. So I read a few of those while I was still free. It didn't take. But when I was in prison one day, I just said to myself, "Man, I'm sniffing heroin, I'm smoking weed, like gambling, I'm gang stuff." And I'm like, this has to go. I gotta change. And I remembered those books. So I had a friend contact him and tell him, "Listen, I'll pay for them. Just will you send them to me?" He agrees. So I read every book on that list, including, by the way, Free to Choose and The Law by Frederick Bastiat were both on that list. And that just got me, one book leads to another. You look at the bibliography, you become interested in something else. And I just became interested in reading. And I started to change myself, but it didn't take, because I ended up backsliding and going back to gambling, drug use, smoking weed. But I never stopped the
But
reading. I
but
never
was
stopped
there
reading.
anything? But was it? It didn't seem like there was anything. Or well, I guess So some of the books that you describe in your own book weren't necessarily spiritual,
No, I
right?
mean,
I
look,
mean,
I read the Bible multiple times. Later on, I've read the Quran. I read a lot of stuff on Buddhism. As I'm trying to learn which way I'm going, I practiced Judaism for a while. I've read the Torah, some of the Talmud. I used to talk to the rabbi all the time. So that's all taking place. But I still backtracked and I started doing drugs and gambling. And then one day, man, like I just said, if I'm ever going to have any kind of life for myself, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. I got to stop the drugs. I got to stop the gambling. And, I did a bag of heroin. I went to a program in prison and I came back that night and my friend had heroin on the desk. And I said, no, nope. And I have not done it since. That was May, I believe, May 12th or 13th, 2004. And I have not done it since. I've not drinking any alcohol. I've not taken any pills. I have smoked pot, but not, when I'm saying smoking pot, I'm taking one hit to relax and go to sleep. I'm not going out partying.
but
No,
had you already accumulated that library of reading before? Now that you
I
said
did.
didn't take, but
It did.
perhaps might have been slowly dripping down
Yes,
into your
because it's still in
subconscious.
there. And I also met Brent McCall, he who was on the cup. Um, and
Show us that cup again. It was too quick. I couldn't see. Couldn't see.
you got the
All right.
light, so it's making it tough. So
Yeah.
Brent, when I met him, Brent was, Brent's in jail for bank robberies, possession of explosives, shot a cop, and like he looks like a dork. When I met him, I thought this dude must be like some computer guy or something. You know what I mean? Turned out no. And Brent is no joke. Like I mean, they came to take one time when you go on, for instance, something called confinement to quarters. If you get a ticket, they take your TV. They went to take Brent's TV, and the CO correctional officer said, "So if I come to get the TV, what's going to happen?" And Brent told him, "One of us is getting hurt. That's what's going to happen." And they brought what they call the goon squad, which is a whole slew of correctional officers and lieutenants dressed in riot gear. And
With a
Brent didn't,
shield, probably with a shield in
and
front of
Mace and
him. Yeah.
Mace. And they came to get Brent, and Brent knocked out the lieutenant, or at least knocked him down, punched another CO, gave him a black eye, and they finally restrained them. But so when I met Brent, Brent was a socialist, but he was wicked smart and wicked talented and liked to read. So I started having him read some of the libertarian stuff, Mises, Hayek, Bastiat, Rand, and so he came around, and Atlas Shrugged, so eventually in 2004 we both decided at the same time it's time for a change. We decided to change our lives, so we kept reading, we kept implementing the lessons we did. Ben
What
Franklin.
about, or did you have some kind of positive feedback that enabled you to contrast the chaos that was going
Sure,
on before
sure,
to
ration,
it made
sure. First step, rational egoism and the psychology of self-esteem by Nathaniel Branden. So you've got that basically set the ideals to aim at, and also
Mm.
with especially with Nathaniel Branden are pointing out a lot of the flaws in what we're dealing with. Uh, and and then Brent bought a book called Inside the Criminal Mind by Dr. Stanton Samanow, where he lays out what when I read that book, I thought it was just a blueprint to the way that I thought. And
Would
he
you find
talked,
that was even more influential than Rand and all the other books that you had
I
read
don't,
before
it's
because he
hard to
pins the
say.
psychology of the criminal
As
so well?
specifically to a criminal, yes, but as to broader, because with Ayn Rand, you get a rational ethic, right? A rational morality, something to aim at. Whereas Samanow talks about personal responsibility, he talks about integrity, he talks about morality, but he doesn't put forth a rational moral code. He basically just accepts this, the general ethical ethos that's operative in society as a whole, which for the
Mm.
most part isn't bad. I mean, I mean, we could get into the problems with it, but don't lie, don't steal, don't commit robberies, work hard, so that's good as a base. But Ayn Rand teaches you how to think. And how to think rationally, introduction to objectivist epistemology. But this book, Inside the Criminal Mind, talked about what it takes to change a criminal. And, you can't allow a criminal even one lie, not one. A criminal cannot tell a lie. It has to go from total irresponsibility to total integrity. That's it. No lying, no manipulation, no power thrusting, trying to use your anger and trying to use violence to get what you want.
So
And
what
so
did that
both
what
of
did so
us,
what did that mean for you? Because from what I remember, and I read the book so many years ago, but from what I
yeah.
remember, the criminal has to write down all of their thoughts. You have to like keep this
Well,
kind
no,
of
I didn't
journal
do
where you.
that. Yeah, yeah, they put together what he called the phenomenological method of phenomenological reports, where you just write thought reports. No, I've never done that. I've journaled, don't get me wrong, and I've kept track of how I'm thinking, but I never did exactly what Sam and I did. I thought it was too time consuming, and quite frankly, I thought it was unnecessary. But I did have Brent to point out my thinking errors, and I did the same for him.
So
We
you
ended
had
up,
your enlightened witness as Brett, and your cellmate is your enlightened witness Brett.
well, we
You
weren't
got
cellmates yet. We
oh,
weren't cellmates yet.
but
We were in the
you get somebody who gets to check your intellectual integrity and your moral
All the
integrity
time.
all
Yes.
the
And
time.
we do that back and forth. So if I'm doing something that's indicative of criminal behavior that might not be outright criminal behavior, Brent's checking me on it and I'm checking him. And we did this for years. We ended up cellmates in 2007. We were cellmates for 11 years. But before he, Lee,
Lee, I am reading. I know these stories
yeah,
because I actually am on chapter 3 on the
yeah,
book.
yeah.
So you're behind the times, girl.
You're behind the times, Lee. But anyway, so yeah, Brent and I served that for each other. And, we read The Criminal Personality. My friend Subby sent it to me. It's a 3-volume set that really is what Inside the Criminal Mind is a distilled version. But it tells us these are the thought errors, need for excitement, power thrusting, lack
Now,
of
would you
responsibility, lack
recommend
of
that
trust.
would you recommend that for civilians to read? Because I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
overall there is a
Yeah.
perception of the criminal that I think is dominant, and there's a moral attitude towards the criminal that society makes these people the way they are, and that we need to rehabilitate them. And Sam and I have sort of a different perspective about it, that they've
He
never been.
does, and he's right, but it's clunky, and I don't talk like him, right? Because what he
Yeah,
says, and he's right, is he says actually criminals don't need to be rehabilitated; they need to be habilitated. And the
habilitated.
reason is because rehabilitated means to return one to their formerly good state, which criminals have never had. So he's right, but in my experience, trying to talk like that, you just end up arguing about what is habilitation, why not, and then you have to explain this whole damn thing instead of just saying, listen, rehabilitation should be part of the correctional environment. And if you try to get bogged down in habilitation, you're going to go crazy. I know because I've tried, and you just end up arguing, and it's just pointless. But yeah, so Brett and I are engaging this stuff, and we're engaging Ayn Rand, we're engaging that. We read up on cognitive therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, all types of stuff. We did the Benjamin Franklin 13 week plan for self improvement that Ben Franklin outlines in his autobiography, and we just knew that this was going to be a never ending fight for integrity, to be better, to do better. It's hard even today, man. Like, I get it, Mark. When you get online and people start running their mouths and you tell them I'll choke you, believe me, I get it. I just can't allow that for myself. Even my well, let's debate it thing, that sometimes cannot even be a healthy approach for me. But it's healthier than threatening violence, and I find that it also helps to, spread the message that I want to spread. But there's also that part of me that just wants to dominate, right? Like, you are starting something with me, and I will dominate you intellectually rather than physically. But I certainly get the get the impulse to just tell someone, listen, you don't know who you're fucking with, pal. You know what I mean? But I just can't go there. And I really, I don't want to. I don't want to be that dude ever again in my life.
So all right. So now so you get introduced to rational principles. You get introduced to a program through Saminow and with your buddy Brent that enables you to check each other morally and to stay on this moral course. I'm still wondering what impulse, what finally got you to that change? I mean, it's still sort of a mystery to
s-
me. It just
become
seems
sick.
to happen out of the
You're
blue.
yeah. It's like it's just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like the way that I was living was not compatible with what I was reading. So there's
Mm.
cognitive dissonance. One had to go, I guess. If I had to put it in layman's terms, I couldn't keep reading about heroes in Atlas Shrugged and virtuous selfishness and be bothering my mother to bring me heroin so I could get high and sell it in prison. You know what I mean? The two just were not compatible. So one had to go. And luckily for me, Brent had the same epiphany at the same time. The
What
chances of that
enabled you?
happening,
But what enabled you to see that one was a virtue and what you were doing was a vice? That one was
well, I'm not
pro-life
an
and the other
idiot.
was
I mean,
anti-life.
yeah, you're reading the,
Well, there's
Opar, for
people that read
instance.
Atlas Shrugged. There's people that read Atlas Shrugged all the
Yeah,
time, or the
I
Fountainhead
happen to
all the
have
time,
my
and they
verbal
see,
IQ.
but
My
they,
verbal
but
IQ is 130, and I'm also honest. So,
but they
by
see
being
those guys as bad. They see those guys as
yeah,
villains. I'll give you
well,
a perfect.
because
I'll give you an example real fast. So when Jennifer Bouani and Jack Schumann wrote the a series for Atlas Shrugged, they wrote it. It's called The Strike. They wrote this brilliant pilot. I thought it was amazing. And we shopped it around for a while. We got the shopping rights. And one of the first people I went to was Gail Ann Hurd, who's one of the biggest producers in Hollywood right now. She did Walking Dead for anybody who likes that show, for anybody who's in sci-fi. She's huge. And so I wrote her a letter. I sent her, the show Bible. I talked about the pilot, sent her the pilot as well, talked about how amazing a pilot it was for so many different reasons. They really modernized it well. And her assistant wrote me back and said, Mark, we love you, but we hate Ayn Rand. And actually, it would be this would actually, we wouldn't have very much integrity if we were to produce this, because we're actually in the middle of producing a documentary that's very anti Ayn Rand. So there are people that
okay,
see these virtuous characters as horrific human beings, and of course
sure.
see Ayn Rand as a horrific human being. So how are you, with no standard, with really no standard of right or wrong, to other than the criminal standard, able to distinguish the objectivist virtue from, let's say, the
Well,
conventional virtues,
I wanted
and
to know the truth. I was on a pursuit of truth, and I've read numerous books on logic. I read How to Think Straight, Being Logical, The Art of Argumentation, When Good Thinking Goes Bad, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, and Mountains of Economics, which is all
did you
about,
have Peikoff's course on
rational
logic?
thinking.
Did you have Peikoff's course on logic as well?
No, much later on, I did get Understanding Objectivism. I got Objective Communication, but in book form. Ayn Rand's The Art of Nonfiction, but all these things are help to think clearly. But I mean, look, I was a Christian for a while until the contradictions just I couldn't deal with it anymore. I
How
mean, it
long
was
were you a
so
Christian?
a year, maybe a year. I mean, I took all kinds of Bible study courses. I've read that book, but the rabbi gave me a book called Pious Fraud, Their Hollow Inheritance. And it just pointed out all the inconsistencies, all the contradictions. And I went through them and it was unequivocal. This is just not true.
A
And
rabbi gave you that book.
yeah, about Christianity. Yeah. And then, it became clear to me, look, the stuff that I'm believing, I tried doing the Judaism thing, but that it just wasn't holding water for me. Like, the idea of turning a person into a pillar of salt. So I started to interpret it more and more in terms of symbolism. And then I thought, well, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like it's not true. These stories are not true. But I was still a deist basically. But I kept going. I kept challenging myself. And eventually that had to go. And I just
Were you
became an
afraid?
atheist.
Were you afraid of letting go of God?
Yeah, I mean the deist stuff, not as much, because there's not much coming with it. But the Christianity stuff, yeah, the idea that you have this being that loves me and I'm going to get eternal peace, that sounds great to me. But it wasn't true, so it had to go by the wayside. I wanted to believe, for instance, maybe reincarnation was true, but I just kept going, always seeking truth, always applying the laws of logic to anything that I did. I took a course. The first course on philosophy I ever took was on social ethics, and I took it in prison, and I didn't even complete the course. But something that we were taught, and I think in maybe the second or third week, stuck in my mind, like super glue. And it was Aristotle's principle that two contradictory things can't both be true, that a thing cannot be and not be at the same time. And almost from that moment, through all the drugs and all the chaos that was in my life, I vowed to purge my mind of contradictions, that I was not going to allow contradictions to exist in my mind. When I came across one had to go. You know, at least one, maybe both, but at least one had to go. And so once I started that and I made that commitment, you just keep applying it, and applying it.
I think
That's
people have to understand something because, I as well turned to Christianity probably for about a year or two, and like you, read the Bible multiple times, read Christian philosophers quite a bit, and found their work actually more inspiring than the Bible itself. It was like the imagination of the Christian philosophers was more compelling to me with respect to Christianity than the actual book itself. One of the books that influenced me most, believe it or not, wasn't a Christian philosopher, but it was Bulgakov's Master and the Margarita. There's chapters in there with that deal with Jesus directly, and his and the meeting between he and Pontius Pilate. It was so influential to me; it almost converted me on the spot. But it takes a lot of courage to take this abstraction that two contradictions they can't exist at the same time. One thing has to go, and to use that against as a standard by which to judge a philosophy that you're clinging to as a sort of life preserver, as a psychological life preserver, because, well, the idea of an all-knowing, all-loving God is so compelling to somebody who didn't receive the kind of love that that you wish you could have as a child, didn't receive the kind of reflection of your goodness, the inner goodness that you wish you had. And on top of that, there's that kink in Christianity given to us by Paul, I think, that you'll go into everlasting hellfire should you reject,
yeah,
this.
nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. So I know for me, giving up God was a super, super hard phenomenon. Not just because of the fractures within my own psychology and inner loneliness, and the feeling of not being reflected or loved and being on the outside, but really that, what if this is right? What if I am condemning myself to some curse? Because I remember when
Yeah.
I started to break away from Christianity, I had a friend who was a huge Christian who looked at me and is like, "Are you sick?" He asked me if I was sick. Like, something going on with you? Do you have cancer? Or why are you changing your mind about this fundamentally true concept? So it takes a lot of courage to break away from stuff like that. You're
Yeah,
making it seem.
self-honesty. It's funny, Mark, because people will often say to me in, conversation that, like you're just about to, oh, you make it sound easy. It's simple, right? But it's not easy. Doing what's right, and undoing that spider web of contradictory thinking and inimical values, that's not easy at all. It takes a monumental amount of effort. It takes a monumental amount of courage. But what was the alternative? You know what I mean? What was the alternative? So I had to face the fact that for most of my life I had been a lying scumbag. I had to face the fact that I was a coward. I had to face the fact that most of my violence stemmed from weakness, not strength, as I, tried to project. But you just got to do it. You got to just, I was lazy. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to do anything. And what was the alternative? And it's, the effort I put
The
in then.
alternative is existing in that a psychologically defensive state, and never ever changing. That's the
Yeah.
alternative.
But,
Which for some people, because it's comfortable and they know it, is preferable to the discomfort of admitting where you lack, where you're strong, what you're missing, so that you can move on and improve and become better.
yes, it's stepping out of the comfort zone is an absolute necessity.
Absolute necessity. So I know we just have a couple of minutes here, but I was wondering, maybe we should we're going to get into the weeds over the series, folks. We're going to get into the weeds more, but I wanted you guys to know about Michael's life, and the next show I'm going to talk about my life a little bit and my influences. and where I came from, so that you understand a little better. But Mike, do you want to field any questions? Are there any questions out there with respect to Mike's early life, and the influences that he ended up picking up that ended up changing his dynamic, his relationship to the world, his relationship to
Sure.
himself? If you guys, if
I
there's, if there,
I will commit right now. I will answer anything about my life.
yeah,
Anything.
if there's, I don't know if Leigh should ask any questions because she's just saying you're curing her because you're cute. So,
Well, at
which
least
is
someone
great,
thinks so.
Michael. It's great to know. It's great to know that. Uh, but if there's anybody who has any questions with respect to Michael's upbringing and any suggestion, like any questions about books that you may want to read, if you're finding yourself in a situation where you think you need a little bit of psychological help, you think you need some roadmap that can help you get yourself back on track, please feel free to unmute, or if we can, Lou, unmute somebody to ask the question, or somebody. Do we have the capacity to raise hands here in this?
Yes, they
Somebody
do.
can.
I
Somebody
cannot
can.
believe that you don't know that, but yes, they do.
I do know that. I was just making sure.
If you knew it, you wouldn't have to make sure.
Hello.
Hello,
Uh,
Yeah,
who's
we
that?
don't need to raise hands. I can just do this. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, Leigh.
Ignore that I'm really sick because my throat hurts and I look like shit, but I don't care. I just I spent most of this kind of crying because Mike, you just make me very emotional. I have a lot of issues and I'm very sick. Um, but no, I just wanted to say really quick, and I'm struggling to get my words out. I've been really like mentally ill and shit basically my whole life, and I've been going through a lot of shit the last few months. And you both have just really helped me with that and like given me the mentality that I need to take accountability for what I've done to get myself into some of this shit and get myself through it. And I feel a lot better and a lot happier. And I think you've really been a big part of that. So I just wanted to say thank you and thank you. And yeah,
Thank you,
Oh,
Lee.
good, good. I'm
you're
glad.
welcome.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad the words that we say are able to help you, and I
They,
hope you
yeah,
can. I hope you can pick up more books than just Michael's View from a Cage,
it's the best
and
book ever.
the best book ever. Mike, it's the best book ever.
You will know that
I,
if you read it.
I wish it
I'm
sold like
reading
it
it.
was the best book ever. That'd be great.
I made my
I am
dad buy a copy because he put my original one in storage with and won't go and get it for me. So I had to get him to buy me another one. So
Michael. Any other books you'd recommend for Leigh to read that are, easily digestible? But I think the Psychology of Self-Esteem is a very good one. I think Nathaniel's Brandon, Art of Living Consciously. I like a lot of Nathaniel Brandon's books with
Yeah,
respect to.
I would recommend before the problem with the psychology of self-esteem is very dense with technical terminology and philosophical stuff. Nathaniel Brandon does have a great book called How to Raise Your Self-Esteem. I would highly recommend that
yeah, I
probably
think I need to
first.
raise my self-esteem a
Yeah,
bit.
How to Raise Your Self-Esteem and also Honoring the Self by Nathaniel Brandon are great. After that, then come back and I think we can get you some other stuff too.
So,
Okay.
so How to Raise Your Self-Esteem and Honoring the Self. Get those
Yeah.
by Nathaniel Brandon. Write that down, Leigh. I don't see you
Okay.
writing it down.
Well, because where's my? I don't even know where my phone is because I'm
Okay,
on
get it.
my iPad and I
I
put
don't
it
think
Get
down.
it.
people actually write down much anymore, Mark,
Well,
either. Although
type it
I
down on
do.
your phone, and or record it or something so that you have
Well,
that,
I
because
think
you
this
should
is
be getting
being
those books
recorded so we can
immediately.
watch it back later. So I'll just watch
That's
it
true.
back. Yeah, Manu, I do have memory, but I'm also just it's gone out of my head immediately because I'm really ill. So
Yeah. All
something
right.
about self-esteem. I'll watch it back.
All right. Watch it back. Get those books, and it'll help you.
I
And
will.
read those books a couple of times. Don't just read them once. Read them a
Okay.
couple of times
Okay.
until the
Yes.
concepts become embedded in you. All right. Hang in there,
Okay.
Leigh. We
You're
got
so
your
welcome.
back.
Okay, I'm going now.
Bye bye. Does anybody? It's good to see Katie. Hey, Katie, it's good to see you out there. Are you outside walking? Almost. You're almost walking, but good. I like to see you outside in the sunshine, getting air. Oh, good, Katrin. What's up, Katrin?
Hi. So I have a question that's been partly answered already. I wanted to know which books helped you most to overcome the abandonment issues.
It's so hard to say because there's so many of them. You know what I mean? So, God, I would say the three books that have helped me the most in life are Inside the Criminal Mind by Stanton Samanow, Psychology of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, and Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. But also, I mean, anything that has to do with cognitive behavioral therapy or rational emotive behavior therapy. So, The Guide for Rational Living, for instance, by Albert Ellis was a big help. Reason and Emotion in Psychotherapy by Ellis was a big help. Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy by Dan Burns. So anything along those lines that point out cognitive distortions and how to alter them have
Michael,
been great.
did you ever read Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller?
No, I have not.
All right, so I would also recommend that, Katrin, in addition to these other books, which will help you. I think the books that Michael are representing are talking about will definitely help you conceptualize your issues and actually have a program, an attack on how to get not only get to the root of them, but to overcome them and become a functional human being. What I like about the Drama of the Gifted Child is that it's about some of the emotional stuff that you have to experience in order to grieve the abandonment that you experienced as a child. Often we ignore this stuff, or we paper it over with untruths, right? Because we don't want to acknowledge exactly what our parents were, who they were, and that kind of honesty with respect to what kind of childhood you had, and grieving over it, honestly grieving over it, will start the process of I think getting over abandonment issues, so that you can just be chill and relax and not worry about people leaving you.
Yeah, I also would look into John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth attachment theory for that specific abandonment stuff. They've got some pretty good stuff as well.
Is that really dense, or is it really
Yeah, I
digestible?
mean, a lot of the stuff it's hard sometimes for me to get what is dense and what's not, because I've been so enmeshed in this stuff for so long. But oftentimes I'll recommend a book like just to casual, just a friend, and they're like, dude, what are you having me read here? You know what I mean?
I mean, I
So
don't remember the Nathaniel Branden book, The Psychology of Self-Esteem, being dense, but
yes, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, when
okay,
you're
it
getting
was.
into stuff like psychoepistemology, social metaphysics, hit the biocentric model of psychology that he uses. I mean, yeah,
Well, but I just liked the way objectivism links self-esteem to the world and to
me
action
too.
and to your
Absolutely.
efficacy in the world. It's not about self-talk, even though good positive self-talk is good for you. It certainly doesn't hurt. It's not about that. It's a primacy of existence way of looking at the world, and that will help build your self-esteem too. So,
Right.
yeah. So I always recommend Nathaniel Branden's books.
Me too.
Yeah. I'll have some more. I have a bunch of them back there. I'll try to grab at some point and recommend them in the next session we do next weekend.
Awesome.
I hope that helps you, Katrin.
Thank you.
Katrin,
Good,
you're
I've read
awesome.
already. I've already read Nathaniel Branden. So I will get the next one and see how it goes.
You can also
Good.
see his lectures online too,
Yeah.
Nathaniel Branden.
He was a pretty smart cat, I think, in a lot of ways, and I think he integrated objectivism and philosophy in a very interesting way. So
Yes.
he's certainly a good start for if you want to start integrating psychology and philosophy. Nathaniel Branden is a good guy to go to.
Agree.
Any other questions, folks, before we adjourn for this Saturday? Well, you heard Michael's early story, and I was relieved to know that many of those stories I had read in the book, which I am currently working my way through. So now Leigh can't bust my balls so much. And it's the best book ever. She says again, Michael, you're beating out Dostoevsky, Ayn Rand. You're beating out so many authors, Faulkner.
Oh, Faulkner
Tennessee
sucks.
Williams.
Don't put Faulkner in there.
No, sometimes Faulkner writes okay.
No,
I'm
he's
all
a
right with
bum.
him. No,
He's a
no, he's
bum.
not a bum. He's not a bum.
A
Now,
bum.
yeah, I could say that. Look, you know what? Do you know what the #1 book novel of all time was in Time Life magazine?
Don't tell me it's late in August.
What? No, it's no. Ulysses by James Joyce. Now that is a bad book.
I've heard.
That
I've never read it.
Okay, you can't read it. It's
I won't.
impossible. It doesn't have a punctuation point in it. It's basically the stream of conscious of one man through one day of his life, and it is impossible to read. But it was considered the best book ever, which disturbed me because that should be, Ayn Rand should be up there, and I don't even know if she was in the top 50. Anyway, folks, there you go. There you go, Atlas Shrugged. And I think The Fountainhead is great too, because it's about the morality of egoism itself, and it's the self-esteem of the artist, which we see so little of today. So any other, if we don't have any other questions, folks, then we're going to see you next time. You can certainly write the questions on Patreon, and I will try to answer them to the best I can, or get Michael to answer them and then copy and paste on the Patreon so that you guys can, if you have any other questions, can answer them. So next week we'll get in a little bit into my life, my influences, and then we'll start talking about psychology and philosophy in a little bit more detail. And we can deal with one another's problems and help each other out. If any of you guys are in any crisis situations, we're not professionals, of course, but we can tell you what works for us, and perhaps it will work for you too in improving your life. So folks, remember, you are self-made. You are a self-made soul. One of the most empowering things that Rand gave me was understanding that I am a being of self-made soul. I don't think I knew that. Like you, Michael, I think I was just a determinist by default. Because if you're in drift mode, folks, if you let your consciousness drift and you just absorb your environment, that's basically the direction that you'll go. And I think a lot of people live by osmosis. They absorb information, they absorb the basic moral premises of their culture, and they don't really go beyond that. They don't question it. They don't become the captains of their own destiny. And that's what we are trying to do with our lives. And we hope that we can get you to do the same with yours. And then you become capitalists. Once you understand that you are a being of self-made soul, that you are the captain of your own destiny, then you don't want people telling you what to do, because you will trust your own rational judgment over somebody else's. You don't need to be parented by a government. You need to parent yourself. And so here's to independence, folks. May you be an independent being, and when you are with other people, inter-independent, not dependent, but inter-independent, recognizing your own self as an independent sovereign being, but also being with and cooperating with other people whom you like and love, and giving them your all. All right, folks, so that'll do it for today. Make sure to bring your questions to the Patreon. We will answer them. And wait,
Katie has a question. Katie says she has a question.
Katie, we can't leave Katie without answering her question. What is it, Katie? What's up? Hello, Katie. You got to unmute yourself.
Yes, you must unmute.
Unmute. I thought I did.
You did now.
Now you are on.
Okay.
What's up, kid?
Okay. I had to make sure. Okay, so it more has to do with the Christianity thing. I know you said the contradictions and stuff is like a lot of the reason why you changed your mind on it. But like, how did you actually get away from it? Because like, I mean, I have my doubts on some things, but like, I don't know. Why is it so easy to just like fall on that in with life?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that it's not like this hadn't been ingrained in me from a child, right? It came about as an adult. I became a Christian, and then I started reading about it, and so it was easier for me to get rid of than somebody who's been indoctrinated into it. But with that said, just absolute honesty, just absolute honesty in not giving in to any fears and putting nothing above the truth. Nothing.
Yeah. So So Michael, in a sense, was lucky in that he wasn't introduced to Christianity early in life. So it's a little easier to give up something that isn't a part of your childhood, right? Isn't a part of your
Mine
upbringing.
was part of my childhood and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I was introduced to Christianity as a young kid. Babysitters that took care of me took me to Sunday school. I still have my mini New Testament from the time I was 7 years old. I still have it
Oh, Jesus.
somewhere. And so early on, it was sort of introduced into my system, and it became more prevalent when I was 15 and 16 because I went to a Catholic school and and we had religion class every day for 4 years. And then a couple of actors I knew in my theater company became intense Christians, born again Christians, and they convinced me to go along with them because I was going the opposite direction because I had been introduced to Rand, but they introduced me to born again Christianity, and I found great comfort in it. Now, it was because of the place that I came from. I had no metric for a loving father. I didn't know what a loving father was. I knew my mother loved me, but she also put me in dangerous circumstances and perilous circumstances and often treated me as the adult and her as the child, which is a terrible situation for a child to be in for their self-esteem. So I was in a tremendously insecure place, and a place of feeling very unloved. And the comfort that religion can give you, a comfort, it's like comfort food. Comfort food makes you temporarily feel good, right? But it's not the solution. In the end, it's even bad for you. You can't live on comfort food. And I began to see, as Michael saw, the contradictions in the religion that made it a sort of it made it horrible for me. It wasn't just that I was breaking away from something because I saw contradictions. I saw things in it that in the religion itself that were actually bad. I remember my final breaking point with going to a formal church was when we were in the church and they were singing "Bathe Me in the Blood of Jesus," and I realized they meant it literally. Bathe me in the blood of Jesus was literal. That the Eucharist, the miracle of the Eucharist is that you're literally eating the body of Christ, right? That's the miracle of the Eucharist. You're cannibalizing the virtuous, the most virtuous person in the world. And who knows, by that cannibalization, maybe you're supposed to be ingesting virtue. I don't know, but it all seems so savage and horrific. And the story itself began to become savage and horrific. The way the father sacrificed his son, and for people who were less virtuous, the ideas became untenable to me. It was hard for me to let go of the idea of a God watching over me and loving me, though, because I needed that. I felt very insecure. I felt like without that, I was just drifting alone in a vacuum. But the contradictions became so intense for me that I eventually had to just tough it out and jump off the bridge, just literally jump into the void and say, all right, I have to find out what happens when I do this. It's religion, especially if you've been born with it, is a very difficult thing to get away from because it's most people's moral standard. But as you discover the moral standard to be ineffective for the most part, and contradictory, and as you find the ideas themselves, the idea of God himself to be contradictory, it'll be harder for you to hold on to it. But it's still going to take some grit to let go. Just letting you know, it's going to take some grit. It's going to be a little scary, but you're going to be fine. If you let go. I don't know. You're gonna make your own choice. It's your own life, your destiny. I can't tell you where to go. That's going to be up to you. And I've never been one to deny a guy a drink when he needs one, or a girl a drink when she needs one. If that's what you need to get you through the day, I'm going to accept it for now. Just like Manu, sipping on that hard Brazilian beer.
Booze, yeah.
Well,
Vodka.
that's not necessarily true, because how many times do you tell me don't drink, Mark?
He said not
Yes.
deny you a drink.
Yeah, not deny you drink if you need it. I think it's terrible for you. I gave it up 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago or so. I haven't had a sip of alcohol since. I am very happy about it. My life is better for it. I prefer to be conscious than unconscious. At the time, though, I didn't, and I had to overcome that. And
Hey,
philosophy
I've
helped
been
me to
doing
overcome that.
good.
What's that?
I said I've been doing good with that though. And by the way,
Good.
this is a no nicotine vape. So I haven't
Okay.
had any nicotine for like almost a month.
All right.
Okay, good. No nicotine and no booze, and you're on your way. And walking every day. And let's hope you're walking every day. And
I
that's
wasn't walking initially when you said something, but Logan went over to the library, so he left me. So then I got up and was walked.
okay, good. Movement is good. Remember, movement is good. And that will also add to your self-esteem. The more that you don't drink, the more that you, and I hate to talk about virtues in the sense of denying yourself life because they're not. You're just working for positive values. You're not drinking because you know it's good for you. You're not vaping nicotine because you know it's good for you. You're walking because you know that you're going to rust if you don't walk, and that walking is good for your joints, it's good for your bones, it's good for your body, even if it hurts you to walk because you have these surgeries and issues. Still, the movement is therapeutic. And once you embrace that value, the value that pro-life things, which took me a long time to understand, your life will start improving, and virtue will not become a denial; it'll become an embracing of life, as you'll see. Well, thanks, Katie. You have a good day today. All right.
Yep. Ah.
Peace. All right, folks. If there are no other questions, then I think we can conclude for the day. We will see you next week. Ask questions on Patreon if you have them. We will answer them. I will send them to Michael, or if they're to me, I will answer them. I'll be checking in on them every day just to make sure. And I'm going to get Lou to manage the Patreon site so there are no more fuck ups in the future. I wish you guys the best Saturday possible. You can't see it because it's blurred, but I have my little urn with Frankie and his picture in the background here. I just wanted to show everybody. My little guy, is always with me. You can't really see it. It's not working. Can you see?
You're too blurred. You're too blurred, dude.
There you go. You
There
can
we
see his
go.
face a little bit.
For a second, yeah.
But he's with me always. He's right next to my bed, and he's gonna have a little shrine built to him. He's my bud. I'm gonna start crying, which I've already done today after my training session, but I'm not gonna do it here for now. I'm gonna hold it together, and we will see you guys next Saturday because this is a day that I can always do. I don't work on Saturdays, so from wherever I am, we'll be doing this show, and we'll hopefully get even deeper weeds, folks, as the weeks go on. All right, guys. Peace. Remember, you are a self-made person. We'll see you next time.